Okay, so far for nonfiction text structures, we've covered a few of these. We've already covered the sequence, chronological, and temporal, sequential. We've talked about categorical. Today, we're going to move on to compare and contrast. So you're familiar with a Venn diagram. We're going to talk about what does compare and contrast mean. It just means we're comparing two things, two or more things, and we're looking at how they are the same and how they are different. Some things that we might see in these type of text structures are words like similar, same, alike, both, as well as. Those are similarities, unlike, as opposed to, on the other hand, in contrast, instead. These can be sign words that we're going to compare and contrast. It doesn't always mean that these words are going to appear if you have a comparison like we'll look at in the Titanic. We don't necessarily see these words, but the comparisons are implied throughout. So I just want to read this quick one. It says there are many different kinds of terriers. One of the smallest kinds of terriers are Yorkshire Terriers, sometimes called Yorkies. These little dogs have long, silky hair and only weigh about 7 pounds, 3 and 2/10 kilograms. By contrast, the Airedale Terrier is much larger at up to 60 pounds, 27 kilograms. Similar to the Yorkie, the Airedale has long hair. So we have some similarities that both of these dogs are terriers. They both have long hair. But the size of the animals are different. The Airedale Terrier is much bigger than the Yorkshire Terrier. So they are immediately, you can see some of the similarities and differences with these animals. Again, some of the words that you might see that would help you indicate that you're looking at it, compare and contrast would be both, same as, likewise. Any of those words that help you start to figure out, okay, these things are alike or these things are very different from one another. So here's a list of some of those words. And again, you don't always see something that clear. So I read this page to you on Tuesday, and remember here in this paragraph up here, it's talking a lot about how many of each passengers were booked. So, for example, we have second and third passengers. There were about 500 traveling in third class, 240 booked in second class. It actually tells us that there are 200 first class passengers from Southampton. And then it tells you a little bit about who the people in third class were. It tells you that the passengers were immigrants from Scandinavia. They were off to seek fortunes. Some were just wives and children joining husbands in the New World. And then whole families were traveling to and try to make a better lives for themselves. And they may have spent months trying to, or even years trying to raise to come up with the funds to go on this trip. And then it talks a little bit about more of what the third class passengers had to do here. It talks about the third class passengers had to be inspected by a doctor to make sure they didn't have trachoma, because they wouldn't let anybody on or travel to America at that time who had that disease or that illness. And then it talked about second class passengers really quickly, that they just went in through a different gangway than the third class passengers. They went to the purser's office and then they were told go directly to your stateroom. So they had to make a stop somewhere first and then move on to their staterooms, where the first class passengers had a much more leisurely time. They showed up just before the Titanic was due to set sail. They probably sent servants and their luggage in advance. They probably got on and went right to their rooms. And it talks about many of these people were wealthy Americans returning from vacations or business trips to Europe. So when we think about who these people are versus our third class or our first or second class people, we can come up with a way of comparing them. So here is one way. I put some information in. I'm going to start with third class over here. Even though they were the first group in the page, this just goes first, second, third for this organizer. For third class, it was the most common passenger. It said it was 500 of them in the book. They had to be examined by doctors before boarding. They were mostly immigrants, and they were trying for a better life. The second class, there was a few more than first class based on what was on that page. And then they went directly to the purser's office and then to their cabin. And then the first class passengers, they were the fewest among them. They arrived just before the ship was to leave. They were wealthy. They were either on vacation or there for business. So you can really see the differences of who these people were on each of these classes of the ship, how much they had to pay necessarily to be able to go on the Titanic, and maybe what the purposes of their sailing on the Titanic might have been drastically different based on the class that they were in. So, this is how we would use compare and contrast. Again, really quick, probably just a review. Thanks so much for your time.